I'm the comic relief doctor.
You've got that. You don't need to have one of them on to make that extraordinary.
No.
Your voices are brilliant.
No, well, that's it. Yes, Irishmen find it very difficult to do that one.
Yeah. I must tell you, this morning I was on my way to rehearsals on my scooter bike on the way up to rehearsals, and I passed a fella wearing one of these noses and a comic relief cap, giving joy and pleasure and love to everybody, and a taxi cut him up, and he said, "Where do you think you're going, you bleeding git?" I didn't. I never came
Daleks? You did a Dalek?
Daleks, yes. I've done for a lot of Daleks.
Have you? And then
yes.
A giant spider got you in.
And the spider got me in the end.
Yes.
Yeah, well, not in the end,
no.
but he got me.
Did you do your own stunts?
Yes. Yes, I did, much to the infuriation of Terry Walsh, my stuntman. I did everything that I could apart from falling. If it was riding motorbikes or speedboats or, coming down ladders from helicopters and things, I'd do that because I knew I could do it. But falling would be silly because if I broke something, then everybody would be out of
You
work.
nearly killed half a crew once, didn't you?
I'm afraid so. Well, Barry Letts, my producer, said, "You can drive anything, can't you?" And I said, "No, not really, not without a bit of practice." And he said, "Well, there's a hovercraft. Why don't you have a go at that and see if we can get that into the program?" So we did. We got it in the program, but Barry never gave me any time to practice. And I kept saying, "Can I practice now?" And he said, not yet, I'll let you know when." And he never told me until he said, "Right, go." And so I got into this hovercraft, and I had to come up a riverbank on the Severn and go between two cameras and go over a stuntman who was lying as an old tramp, and as he lay back like that, I went over the top of him with the hovercraft. Well, I did this, but unfortunately there was a very strong wind blowing at the time, and it blew me very much to the port side, and I wiped up the entire camera crew. and they fell. It was very dangerous, because you've got propellers roaring around, both down there and up there, you see, so it could be very uncomfortable. And so Barry said, "Can you do it again?" And he said, "Right, everybody over the other side, go round the other camera." And so they all went round the other camera, and I came, and they said, "Allow for the wind." And I said, "Yes," and I came down and I allowed for the wind, and there wasn't a wind, and so I wiped up all the other cameras.
Hey, bum swizzle, this old Parky, innit?
That's right.
Hello, Parky, mate, you're right good.
I'm fine. I can't do that voice. Impossible. Hey, talking about names, you'll love this name. Do you know what his name really is? Tell him, John.
My real name is Jon Pertwee de Layevo.
There.
Oh,
now that's one for your book.
Say it again. Spell it.
Jon Pertwee de Layevo.
And how does that derive? Or where does it derive from?
Our name is now Pertwee, but years ago we're Huguenots. That's what that little badge is. That means that I'm a Huguenot.
Oh.
And when the family came over to England, they were called Pertwee de Layevo, but nobody pronounced the name Pertwee because it was spelled P-E-R-T-H-O-I-S, so the illiterate English pronounced it Pertwis. So it was changed to P-E-R-T-W-E-E, and now they pronounce it Pee-wee, Petwit, Pardney, Pastwit, and anything else.
do you honestly get people who have a problem with Pertwee, even?
Very much so, yes. In fact, when I was
in the colonies or in
yeah,
this country?
when I was working in the States, in Girl in My Soup, I was very proud and pleased to be working on Broadway at last, and I walked down and saw my name up on the marquee and was very pleased about this, and after about 4 months I went into the stage door and walked up, and the stage doorkeeper, old Jack, was sitting there with a cigar, and as I walked past him he said, "Hey, John!" And I paid no attention because my name isn't Jan. And he said, "Hey, John!" And so I thought it must be something, so I turned around and said, "Me?" He said, "Yeah, John Putrid, letter for you." But if your name was Burjniewski, they get that in one.
Absolutely, they used to be. Yeah. You said that this voice became the postman, but in fact, was he a voice that you'd heard, a real person's voice?
Yes, all the characters that I've done on the radio have been based on people. I'm not an impressionist, but I get the ideas from actual people.
Yes.
As kids, we used to live in Devonshire, on the borders of Devon and Somerset, and we lived on the top of a hill, and there was a wonderful old postman whose name was Pa Curtis, and he walked the equivalent of 3 times around the world in gumboots. So the condition of his feet was utterly deplorable, I think. And he used to go to all the local pubs to give himself a little cheer, because it was a very long walk. I mean, his round must have been some 20 miles, I think, at least, every day. And he used to fill himself up with scrumpy, which is extremely strong draft cider. And by the time he got to the bottom of our hill, he used to look up at the house and say, "God, bugger ain't going up there." Very nice, eh?
He said, them young buggers going to come down and get them. He said, out with it.
And he used to open his letter bag and throw all the letters down in the cow pads. And my father used to be terribly angry about this. He used to get his binoculars out and look and say, God damn it, the damn man's done it again. He said, go on, boys. He said, go down the bottom of the hill and get the letters. And we got 1 penny for bringing the letters up. We got all the letters up out of the mud.
And that's how it started?
That's how it started, yes.
What do you feel about some of the characters then that you've heard, that you've woven into your repertoire over the years? Can you think of any offhand people do you listen to people's conversations? You eavesdrop?
Yes, I do, yes.
You?
Oh, yeah, I remember one marvellous occasion. During the war, a very young and handsome young gentleman called David Jacobs came to us for training. I was in the Navy then with the Naval Broadcasting Section, and David came to train as an announcer. We were on a bus, and we were travelling, I think, down the Mall, and there were 2 young girls sitting in front of us, and there was a very good play on at the time called Seagulls over Sorrento. And these 2 girls were talking, and one said, "Should hear Phyllis? Should I'm going to theatre Thursday?" So the other one didn't react very much to this, and she said, "Oh, yes." She said, "What are you going to see?" She said, "Don't know, I think it's called Sea Lions over Toronto." So there was another terrible pause, and she wasn't very impressed, but she thought she'd better say something. So she said, "Oh, that sounds nice." So she thought better say something else. She said, "Is that the one with the Chinaman in it?" The other one said, "No, I don't think so." She said, "Pity, I like a Chinaman in a play." My lovely director, James Hill, heard a telephone conversation the other day. He was got a crossed line, and a voice said, "So I stood there till my vest was dripping wet." And the other one said, "Well, yes, of course you would, wouldn't you?" And the other one said, "Well, what did it?" And she said, "A horse?" The other one said, "No, it couldn't have been a horse." She said, "Well, rabbits can't reach hanging baskets." Which was Weatherby Wet.
Oh, yes, that was
You know what I mean.
Well, he was based on a lady. I was at a school called Sherburn, if you could call it a school. It was a terrible place. And there was a lady who ran the tuck shop there. And she'd been running it for years. And she was a very polite lady. There were 2 sisters. And when we all went in there in the break, you see, and had a bottle of fizz and a bun. And you had a long bun or a short bun, or probably both, if you could afford 2pence. And so you said, "A bottle of fizz, a long bun and a short bun, please, Mrs. Thompson," or whatever her name was. And she, being a very polite lady, always tried to get the name of the young man who made the order. So she used to say, "Thank you very much, Mr. Next." And that's what that character came.
amazing. Radio work, of course, came after your start in the business, which was, in fact, as an actor. You went to RADA, didn't you?
Yes. Well, I was thrown out.
Why was that?
Well, they said I was incompetent.
Really?
Yeah. Actually, what it really was that I objected to being a wind.
A wind?
Yes. There was a lady who wanted me to be a wind.
What kind of wind?
A Greek wind.
Oh.
Well, there's nothing worse than a Greek wind. Now, it's very boring being a wind because you don't really get into the play. Not that there's very much to do, I think, in Greek plays, because you always rush on and you say, "The most dreadful thing has happened just over there," which is just off stage. You never see anything happen on the stage. It's always just around the corners. And then the winds would go, "Oh, it happened round there." It's dreadful, dreadful. I hated that, and so I refused to be a wind.
Yes.
And I was sent for by Sir Kenneth Barnes, and he said, who is the principal, and he said, I hear that you object to being a wind. And I said, "Yes, I don't like being a wind." He said, "And what's more, you're writing rude things about members of the staff on the lavatory walls." Which I wasn't at all. I promise you I wasn't. My father said, "Did you really write rude things about the staff on the lavatory walls?" And I said, "No, I didn't." And he said that I would get the best QC in the world, or the KC then, and he got Sir Patrick Hastings to back me, and the best graphologist in the world, and said, "Right, now sue him."
Really?
Yes. And so I got away with that. I was brought before a jury of my debtors. In fact, there were a lot of familiar old faces there who are now friends of mine who were supposed to sit in judgment of this dreadful man who did this heinous crime of writing rude things about the staff on the lavatory walls. And, but I took one look at them and said, this is ridiculous, and walked out and left them all sitting there. And they felt frightfully silly because they didn't know where to go after that.
But you were summarily dismissed, were you?
Well, sort of. I left at the end of term. I did the play at the end of the term, you know, where you did it too, Jill, I expect.
Yes, I did indeed. I played the old maid.
You played one role?
Yes. No, I wasn't there very long either. I went into films.
Well, you had to pay sometimes more than one role. You played a little bit, you know, of one role, see? And I played the man who was murdered in the first act, and I played the man who murdered me in the third act. And so I put on the full ginger beard and moustache as the detective who found out who murdered me, just to make sure that nobody knew it was me. And at the end of the show, Sir Noel Coward, then Noel Coward, was judging, and he was the celebrity there, who was giving the prizes away, and he was asked at the end by Sir Kenneth, did you want to, was there anybody there that you thought had any sort of future in the theatre of any sort at all?
Mr. John, yes, very good, very good young lady, excellent young lady. And I very much like the young man who played the fellow who was murdered in the first act, and very good performance by the detective who, in the end, who discovered who murdered him. Very good.
Which was not very popular because that was the very man who played both parts was me, and I had been fired for being incompetent. The first school that I went to, I was thrown out for doing the most dreadful thing. I swung on lavatory chains. I'd seen a Tarzan film, and I'd enjoyed that, and I saw him swinging on these vines, and so I swung from one lavatory chain to another. I only made one before I fell in the pan. And I was severely beaten, and my father was told that this was really the bottom, and that I had to be removed.
Appropriate.
Yes, very appropriate, yes. I was 7.5 at the time, I think.
7.5?
7.5 or 8,
Did
yes.
you actually expel people for doing things like
Well,
that?
you were asked to leave. They called it, you were superannuated, I think. Was the
Yes,
word.
yes. But you were at public school from what? From 7.5 right the way through your teens?
No, I went to a very nice school called Wellington House, and I made a great friend of a man that everybody else was terrified of, a lovely man called Hubert Riley, who was the French master. And most people were terrified of him, and they used to sit in fear and trembling, and he made me roar with laughter. And one day he said to me afterwards, he said, that boy there, he said, stay behind after class. And so all the rest of them went out and said, he, Pertwee's boy, he's going to get whacked. And he closed the door and he said, why are you always laughing at me? And I said, because I think you're terribly funny. He said, you're not supposed to think I'm funny, you're supposed to be frightened. And I said, well, I'm not, I think you're terribly funny. He said, good fellow, he said. And we became enormous friends. He eventually became the headmaster, and I used to go back and see him until the school.
Was there much brutality in those days, though, at public school?
Well, in the school I was in, dreadful.
Was it?
Yes, certain houses were better than others. The house that I was in, there was an immense amount of bullying, and I really got a lot of stick there. Yes.
Why was that? Why were you singled out?
Well, I was different, you see. I was going to be an actor, so I had to be a poofter for a start. I played games and so on, but that had nothing to do with it. The fact that I was going into the theatre to be something different, that was against me. And so when I was a fag, let me make that quite clear what that means.
Yes.
A fag, you know, was the fellow
system.
with the fagging system.
Right.
He ran around after prefects and did jobs and things for them, very important jobs. I remember once I was learning to play the trumpet about a quarter of a mile away from where our house was, and a young boy rushed in and said, Pertwee, Clerk Major wants you. And I said, what for? He said, I don't know, quick. So I had to say, excuse me, sir, I've got to go back to the house. And I went back to the house, and there was my prefect, who said, there you are, Pertwee, make me some toast. And I said, but I'm in the middle of a music lesson. He said, don't argue, make me some toast. And so I had to get a piece of toast and sit in front of a fire that he had in his study and make him a piece of toast. Actually, I didn't really make him the toast. I burnt it deliberately and threw it at him.
And then you got beat.
I came out and there was an enormous gentleman from your country, an Irish gentleman. There were a lot of them about Shepherd's Bush in those days. And he was leaning up against the wall and he went, oi! And I said, what, me? And he said, come over here. He said, here, I said, sign that. And I said, well, how could I resist such a charming invitation? Of course, and so I signed in the autograph and I handed it to him and he went, and threw it away. To this day, I've had no idea at all. I don't know who he thought I was.
That's a killer. Well, that's a killer.
They're terrible.
Did you ever recover from this?